Welcome to Grateful, where we tutor students all around the world in SAT, ACT, and PSAT. Your competition is using a tutor, and probably a really good tutor at that. So don't put yourself at a competitive disadvantage. If you're interested in finding out more about how we can help you in a one-on-one or small group setting, go ahead and reach out. Right now, we're looking at March 2021, Section 1, Reading, and let's go ahead and jump right in. For reading, we recommend giving the passage a quick first read that takes no longer than 60 seconds. I'm going to kind of model the way we do that. Of course, doing it out loud takes a little bit longer, so don't start your stopwatch right now. But we're going to go ahead and go through the passage, and the idea is that we're trusting our mind to know which words to read and which ones not to read. So you're kind of depending on your unconscious mind quite a bit when you do this. You always want to read the introduction here. So the passage is adapted from Age of Dreaming. The narrator describes acting in silent films in the early 1900s. Moran owns the production company that employs the narrator. It's amusing to think how primitive our efforts were in those early years. For my first two films, the interiors were shot on outdoor sets. All copies have long been lost, but the film survived. You would notice that during the office scene, the papers on my desk are disturbed by a mysterious breeze. In the next scene, you see a shadow moving in the corner. These were the conditions in which we shot at that time. Because we worked without the benefit of artificial light, there was a rush to complete the day's filming before the shadows grew too deep. In late May, when we endured an unexpected heat wave, Moran had giant ice blocks delivered to the sets and powerful fans placed behind them to blow the cool air in the direction of the players. If it rained, filming would halt altogether, and we'd scramble to move all the furniture and props under the few permanent roofs. Despite these challenges, everyone remained in good spirits. We were working, yes, but it felt like play. It was hard to comprehend the tremendous good fortune that had suddenly befallen me. Through the making of both films, Hanoko gave me constant guidance. I discerned the difference between myself and a seasoned professional. Indeed, she was the largest influence on my development. "There is no audience to see you," she said. "You don't need to project like you would in a theater as if you're trying to be seen by the person in the last row. Pretend the camera is the one man you're playing to." On another occasion, I was too understated. Hanoko approached me and called cut. "You're painting a picture with your body," she said. "Think of a pantomime. You must express physically what you can't with your voice, and use your face. You have such eyes. They alone speak volumes." Moran nodded, although he couldn't have understood, and I adjusted my actions accordingly. I was surprised by the extent to which he let Hanoko direct things. Not only my own performance, but the placement of the props, the actors. Yet all of her suggestions improved the films, and between her advice and the other direction, I was slowly learning what to do. The transition from theater, which depends on dialogue, was more difficult than I had imagined. Indeed, many stage actors, even those who didn't disdain the new medium, did not make the change successfully. This person was one of the few who was equally accomplished in both realms. I was learning under her tutelage every day. On certain days, Hanoko and I would leave the set and walk into the hills. They were vibrant. The beauty of that landscape was so dramatic I could hardly believe it was real. And I was seeing it, feeling it, in the company of an artist who I admired. One day on our walk, we were discussing a well-known actor, and Hanoko surprised me by her reaction to his name. "He's nothing but a face for the fan magazines," she said dismissively. "He's not a genuine actor." "What do you mean?" I asked, although I didn't disagree. "It's impossible to distinguish one of his roles from another. He's always the same, and it's obvious why. In order to project the believable fiction, the actor himself must have substance. You must possess something internally to perform it externally. He has only a fraction of the talent of an artist such as you." I was, of course, deeply flattered by her compliment. I didn't know how to respond. Hanoko continued talking of this actor and that, without noting my reaction. So we made our way through as quickly as we could there. And what we're trying to do is to get the overall main idea. We are of the belief over here at Grateful that you can only get tiny details or the main idea at any one moment. You can't get them both at the same time. So if you have to choose, and you do, in the beginning you want the main idea. So kind of going through this, we're seeing that it was about details that went into transitioning from a stage actor to a movie actor, and the advice that the narrator gained from people who already had it mastered. So let's go over to question number 1 now. As used in line 2, primitive most nearly means. Okay, so for passage-based vocabulary questions, number 1, you want to get the momentary main idea, the context. You want to know what was being said at that moment. And number 2, you want to invent your own word. This kind of allows you to avoid the answer choices, which, believe it or not, are our worst enemy, because they're intended to take us in different directions. At least 3 of them are, and only 1 of them is right. So what's happening in the beginning? It's amusing to think how primitive our efforts were in the early years for my first 2 films, and then it goes on to talk about all the makeshift props and movie tools that they use, sort of maybe in comparison to the present day or to a more modern time. So how primitive were their efforts? I might say in my own words, how basic, maybe even how childlike, or how non-advanced they were. So whatever word you create on your own doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to kind of convey what was going on in the main idea. The dictionary definition of the word is rarely right in this situation. So coincidentally, I said basic, and that's one of the answers. So that was not by design, but that happens a lot when you answer questions in your own words. Primitive means ancient. Maybe technically it kind of coincides with it. And as we said, the dictionary definition of the word is not usually right. Original kind of means creative. That's different than what we were going for. And natural can kind of go with primitive. But it's very different than what we said in our own words. So the answer for number 1 is A. So question 2 is asking us for the reason why the narrator talked about Jamestown Junction. And we see that right over here in line 5. And what did they talk about with Jamestown Junction? They said that the papers are disturbed by a breeze, there's a shadow in the corner. These were the conditions in which we shot at that time, and we worked without the benefit of artificial light, so there was a rush to complete the day's filming before the shadows grew too deep. So they're kind of talking about, also if it rained, the filming would halt altogether. So they're talking about the challenges of filming without a lot of technology and without a lot of the inventions that came along in film in later years. And that all matches answer choice D for number 2 quite perfectly. So question number 3 is asking for the perspective. Who was it that was speaking? And one area that kind of points that out is around line 24 to 26. We were working, yes, but it felt like play, and it was hard to comprehend the tremendous good fortune that had suddenly befallen me. So far, there's a very good spin on it, and I might say that that removes answer choice A, answer choice B, because they have more of a negative tone, and we're seeing that this had an incredibly positive tone to it. And going on, the narrator says that through the making of both films, Hanoko gave me constant guidance, which I eagerly accepted. I immediately discerned the difference between myself, an untrained amateur, and a seasoned professional who knew everything about the art of acting. Indeed, she was perhaps the largest influence on my development as an actor. So we're seeing a favorable view of the beginning of the narrator's career, my development as an actor. And that exactly matches answer choice D. The narrator is nostalgic about experiences toward the beginning of his career, his development as an actor. Question number 4 is followed by an evidence-based question. And one important rule for SAT reading is you want to always know when your questions are followed by evidence-based questions, because what it's doing is it's giving you a range. We know before we start this question that the answer will lie somewhere between lines 11 and 32. So the test writers in this situation are shining something of a flashlight for us and telling us where to look. So we're looking anywhere between lines 11 and 32, and we're looking for what is it that the narrator attributes his employment in films to. So what I would do, just seeing this question for the first time, is literally read through that area and see if we can find any phrase or sentence that says, this is the reason why I was employed in films, or this is how I got my chance in films. And the quote that the question is directing us to is the one starting on line 22. Despite these challenges, everyone remained in good spirits. We were working, yes, but it felt like play, and it was hard to comprehend the tremendous good fortune that had befallen me. So the tremendous good fortune is the idea of being a famous actor, and it was hard to comprehend that tremendous good fortune. So it was something that was happening kind of accidentally. And that's answer choice C for number 4. And the quote that we looked at that backed it up was lines 24 to 26. So C for number 4 and B for number 5. So question number 6 is our passage-based vocab question, where we're going to want to get the momentary main idea, and then we're going to want to invent a word to replace the given word. So what's happening around line 35? We see there's no audience to see you, she said one day in Japanese as I gestured expansively to convey my anguish at the death of one of my fellow soldiers. You don't need to project like you would in the theater as you're trying to be seen by the person in the last row. Pretend the camera is the one you're playing to. So the momentary main idea, the context, is the idea that the narrator is receiving advice on how to be a film actor versus how to act in theater. And now getting a little more specific, we're seeing that what the narrator had been doing is gesturing expansively to convey my anguish at the death of one of my fellow soldiers. So gesturing expansively is kind of one of those things that someone in a theater would do, just pointing far away and sort of playing to the size of the crowd. And that would be to express my anguish. So in this kind of more theater kind of way, which ends up being wrong in the passage, because the narrator is not filming in theater, he's filming in an actual film. So what he's doing is trying to express in a theater-like way his anguish. And that goes along with answer choice A, to communicate. And 7 and 8 are a pair. We always want to know when a question is followed by evidence. So here, we know before we begin that the answer for number 7 will lie somewhere between lines 53 and 90. And that's not really the most narrow range ever. So the passage is not really helping us as much as we would like it to. Nevertheless, it is helpful to know that we don't have to look at the first 52 lines of the passage to answer this question. So the question is asking us in what way Hanoko influences the narrator's development. So we see a lot of areas that could be responsible for that. In the beginning, I was surprised by the extent to which the other person let Hanoko direct things, not only my own performance, but also the placement of props, the movements of the other actors. Yet all of her suggestions improved the films. And between her advice and Moran's direction, I was slowly learning what to do. So Hanoko had a lot of good and useful advice we're seeing so far. As we read on, we're seeing the transition from theater, which depends on dialogue, was more difficult than I had imagined. Hanoko was one of the few who was equally accomplished in both realms. I was learning under her tutelage every day. So we're seeing that it's not easy to transfer your skills from the theater to film. Hanoko was someone who had done that before, and the narrator was learning from that. So this all matches answer choice C. She shares lessons learned from having made the same career shift that he is currently making. And the main quote that we looked at when we made sense of that was this one right here, which is answer choice B. So we have C for number 7 and B for number 8. Question number 9 is a good example of how literal and quote-based the SAT is in the way the questions are designed. You could answer this question based on what you feel like you understand and have a tougher time. But if you answer it more like a crossword puzzle where you're really looking for the exact place this was mentioned, then the right answer just makes a lot more sense. So we're being asked what happens when Hanoko criticizes a well-known actor. And that in the passage pretty much involves this entire area. So we don't yet know exactly what specific quote is being referenced. But the narrator says, "What do you mean?" I asked, although I didn't disagree. Now look how closely the answer choice, that's the right one, matches this. The narrator concurs with Hanoko's opinion, but is curious about the reasoning behind the criticism. What do you mean is the curiosity about the reasoning, and I didn't disagree is the idea of concurring. So it's a perfect fit, and the answer for number 9 is B. Now once again for number 10, we're going to really focus on the literal nature of this, the way that the right answer exactly matches up with one of the answer choices. As Hanoko was explaining her philosophy about good acting, she says, "It's impossible to distinguish one of the other actor's roles, the one that's being criticized, from another. He's always the same, and it's obvious why. In order to project a believable fiction, the actor himself must have substance. You must possess something internally to perform it externally. He has only a fraction of the talent of an artist such as you." So Hanoko believes that in order to project the believable fiction, you must have some substance. You must possess something internally. And that exactly matches answer choice B. the depth of the actor's own feelings and perceptions, the thing that the actor possesses internally. Now,